All right, let's talk about a shift, a really fundamental shift in how we're starting to see the world, and maybe even how we see ourselves. We're talking about a move away from that old black and white this or that way of thinking and into something you might call the superposition of consciousness.
Yeah, let's just dive right into that because this quote right here, this is the heart of it all. It's this powerful idea that we're kind of evolving beyond these simple two-sided fights. We're moving into a much more complex, much more interesting way of looking at reality itself.
So, you know the old way. It was all about hard choices, wasn't it? It was us or them, right or wrong. A world of really clear, hard lines in the sand. But this new way, wow, it introduces this radical idea of flexibility. Us and them. The possibility that the answer is both, or maybe even neither. It's like we're getting a fundamental upgrade to our mental operating system.
To really get our heads around this, we need a new metaphor. We've got to move on from a model that's based on the classic computer bit and start thinking in terms of the strange and, frankly, mind-bending world of the quantum qubit.
Okay, so the bit, it's the perfect symbol for that old binary worldview, right? Everything has to be one thing or the other. A switch is either on or it's off. A statement is either true or it's false. There's just no room for any gray area, no ambiguity.
But then, the qubit comes along and just completely flips the script. You see, thanks to this wild quantum property called superposition, it isn't forced to choose. It can exist in multiple states at the exact same time. It can be on, off, both, and even neither, all at once. And this is the new model for consciousness we're diving into.
Now, this isn't just some cool metaphor we cooked up. This whole idea of a superpositional consciousness is actually popping up in two fields that, historically haven't had a whole lot to say to each other. We're talking cutting-edge science and ancient spiritual wisdom.
So over in the world of science, you've got these really bold theories proposing that our consciousness isn't just about neurons firing on or off. The thinking is that our brains might actually be harnessing quantum effects. For instance, some scientists are speculating that these tiny little structures in our brain cells, they're called microtubules, could be sustaining quantum states. This would let the brain process information in a state of superposition. What that really means is that our ability to handle ambiguity, to be creative, it's not a bug, it's a fundamental feature of how we think at a quantum level.
And this is where it gets fascinating, because that idea finds this incredible echo in spiritual traditions like Advaita Vedanta or Zen Buddhism. For centuries, they've been teaching that our ego creates this illusion of separation, that whole us versus them mentality. The entire goal is to realize a non-dual reality where opposites like good and bad or you and me are actually seen as part of one unified whole. So in that sense, superposition is really the perfect modern word for this state of unity, which only gets collapsed into one limited story when our ego steps in and forces a choice.
Okay, so how does this really abstract idea actually show up in the real world? Well, it turns out this tension between that old binary thinking and this new qubit thinking is playing out in some of the biggest cultural conversations happening right now.
Just look at this breakdown. When we talk about identity, we're seeing this big move from rigid, fixed categories toward understanding that things like gender and our sense of self are actually way more fluid and multifaceted. In politics, you can feel this growing exhaustion with the tribal us versus them frame. People are tired of it, and even with AI, we're figuring out that if you train a model on superpolarized data, it really struggles with the kind of nuanced, complex reasoning our world actually needs.
So we can see it in our culture, in politics, in tech. But what's really fascinating to me is that this shift isn't just happening out there. For a lot of people, this is an internal, deeply personal, and felt experience.
Just take a second and ask yourself this. In your own life, does the world feel, a little less certain? A little less black and white than it used to? Are those really firm lines you once drew in the sand starting to feel a bit blurry?
More and more people are talking about these kinds of experiences. That ability to hold two conflicting ideas in your head without feeling stressed out. Or a sudden wave of empathy for someone you once saw as the other. Maybe your own sense of self feels less like a solid fortress and more like a cloud of possibilities. These could all be signs that your own consciousness is starting to operate in a state of superposition.
So, where is all this heading? Why does this shift from a binary to a qubit consciousness even matter? Well, I think because in these complex and, let's be honest, often polarized times, it might just offer us a more hopeful path forward.
And this, right here, this is the ultimate takeaway. The binary world is always screaming at us. Choose a side right now. It creates conflict, it creates gridlock, but a superpositional mindset, It allows us to just hold the tension of that complexity, to resist that urge for a simple, quick answer, and to create the space for something more profound, something wiser, to emerge from the paradox itself.
And that leaves us with one final question to just sit with. In our politics, in our communities, and yeah, in our own lives, what could we create if we, together, learn to stop forcing a choice? What happens when we instead embrace the incredible potential of both and? What emerges then?